So what went wrong for Inter Milan? The game, like in terms of overall reflections of the game, going into it, I remember you sort of saying a couple of months ago, you know, you had your eye on Inter Milan. And I think we got to the semi-finals and you're like, no one's really talking about Inter Milan. They've got a chance here. And I think it's important to reflect on what you're thinking going into these kind of games, because what will happen will happen. I remember I was sat down to watch it with Kai, and I was like, I had two feelings. I really thought Hakimi could be a bit of a game breaker, but I also, there was something in my gut going, I think Inter got a real shot here. How did you feel about the game going into it?
Yes, I think
such a clash, wasn't it, of so many different things.
I think it's one of those that hindsight's so wonderful, and like the idea of a team that's average age is over 30 versus a team that's average age is like 24.
24.8, yep.
When you look at it on paper, especially the age difference in midfield, it makes total sense that they'd outrun them. However, when you look at Inter's performance against Barcelona, you know, going into it, you don't really think, oh, just because that team's a bit older, they're also really professional and putting some performances against young teams that have been good over the years. So you don't look at it and think, oh, but then you never think something's as easy as that. And yet in the game, from like the first 10 minutes, it's almost like, how could you not just think that it was going to be like that?
Because everyone's like, this is going to be brilliant. This is going to be such a great game because Inter have got the capacity to score goals, but to make life difficult. There's going to be a tactical battle here. You've got a team that plays 3 at the back, a team that plays at 4 at the back. You know, the clash of styles overall, the feeling like it was a new, different challenge for PSG. Like, people kind of putting Inter and Arsenal in the same bracket and PSG and Barcelona in the same bracket. And I think PSG and Barcelona, like, fair enough. But Inter and Arsenal, actually, I think there's a bit more of a difference there. Certainly, obviously, in terms of how they play. But I'm looking at it in front of me now, and it just was an utter domination.
Oh, it really was.
Was there a moment in the game? First goal was on the 12th minute from Hakimi. But like earlier than that, like you say, when you're in the stadium, you can get the feeling a little. You can be a bit more attuned to the feeling, obviously, of the crowd and everything like that. Could you or the Inter fans kind of sense danger?
I think it was more the fact that, so obviously the Inter were shooting in the other side of the pitch to the Inter fans and to us in the first half. And so you can't see it too clearly when Inter did get the rare opportunity to go further up the pitch.
Right.
But you knew there was never a moment where you went, like, there's never a moment. The only possibility in your head that they might score is if they had a throw-in or a set piece.
Yeah.
And a few of those into the box looked a little bit dangerous. But even then, there was never ever a moment where you're like, oh, is that going in? Or is that chance that's been materialised?
Or any sort of, you're right. When the ball's down that other end, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Isn't it? You kind of, so that severe, any kind of build up of pressure and to allow for some belief kind of wasn't there. And then when you see the way that, especially down that right-hand side, PSG were kind of able to run Dimarco and Bastoni ragged.
Well, so my first sort of things I noticed were with the defence in front of us in that first half was Acerbi looked knackered after 5 minutes. Like, he just looked like he'd want to call it a day.
Because that's been a big, like, obviously with them losing the Scudetto.
Yeah.
And we had Nima on the podcast and he called it. It was amazing. He was like, I think Napoli, like, it was well before this, was like, Inter running out of steam here. I think Napoli will win it. After we'd been sort of waxing lyrical about Inter for like 20 minutes before.
Was it near, did you chat near to the Bayern game? Because I think that was when I noticed it. After the second leg of the Bayern game,
probably,
I didn't think Inter looked like they were happy. They just looked relieved that the game was over,
right,
because they looked so tired when they came off that pitch.
Yeah, I think it was around that time, actually. I think it was certainly before the PSG, sorry, it was before the Barcelona semi-final. Certainly before the first leg as well. Yeah, he started to feel like they were kind of running out of steam there. And so, yeah, he was just... He looked mentally knackered, physically knackered, or just kind of stunned by what was in front of him?
The body language was really interesting. It was almost... you could tell oh, I'm in for something. That this is relentless. Like if it's not Dembele,
Sort of overwhelmed.
it's there's Due might have come into the middle at some point. Hakimi's making runs. Like I'm watching Hakimi
Playing up front for a bit.
and yeah, he's gone over to the left. He's playing up front. Like some of the areas he was winning the ball, I'm like, why are you there? Like how have you done that?
Yeah.
Like how did you? I didn't even see you move from point A to point B. And so I think Acerbi was a big one. Dimarco and Bastoni argued a few times.
Yeah.
Which I think it was interesting because Mkhitaryan, who I think's been brilliant in the big games this season at helping those two, and they're almost like a little three-man army.
Yeah.
In this game, it took the midfield. I didn't really know what the midfield were doing. I didn't know if Mkhitaryan and Çalhanoğlu wanted to just help the defence, or you had Barella, whose body language suggested he wanted them a bit further up and to help him, and he was quite high for most of the game.
Yeah. Well, because it was a far. It got pinned to being a 5 because what was interesting was Kvaratskhelia, which he has done before in previous games, but certainly in this game he absolutely stayed high and wide to one pin back the defence, but to try and pin back Dumfries as much as possible, which was, I mean, obvious but clever as well, I guess, because in terms of an out ball for Inter Milan, a lot of people were talking about, Dumfries against Mendes might be an area where Dumfries can kind of do something. And like about the 3rd minute, we sort of got a screenshot of it because we were like, let's see if that does become a thing, because he, there was an aerial duel between the two of them, which was one of the few times they kind of got up there. But even that came from, I think, a free kick to Bastoni on the other side, and he was sort of like looking around and then just walloped it all the way to the other side to give it to him. But yeah, the rotations were like just incredibly overwhelming. And the thing that was big for me, so let me read out a couple of bits here because we'll get to this point, right? So notes we've got here: struggle to apply any pressure to PSG from within a low block, which is kind of what we're talking about. I bet a different question, which we'll come to. Dimarco was often isolated and double teamed with one of the PSG forwards and Hakimi down the side. Mkhitaryan was given a specific role to try and help Dimarco against Yamal and Barcelona, exactly to your point. But in this game, kind of couldn't do it. And Y2K Bug wrote a comment on my video this week, which we thought was a good question. So he says a nice thing first, which I'm not going to read out. Then he says, was there anything the Inter manager could have done during the game to change the formation in order to counter PSG's tactics? And even if Inter had changed tactics during the game, did they have the personnel to enact it against a young, eager and clever PSG team? So let's do the first part of that, because I think with that midfield, what I noticed was that you had that back 5 pinned, and there needed to be some form of commitment, be it to Martinez and Thuram either getting at the two centre-backs to make life harder, or they all needed to kind of be able to suck back in so that Mkhitaryan could come over to that side. Because I think Mkhitaryan was kind of not sort of left out to dry, but there was such a gap, I felt, between that back 5 and then you've got midfield 3, which is narrow, which is always going to be narrow initially, and then the two were sort of in between their midfield and locking onto the two centre-backs of PSG. And either they needed to be brave enough so that they could all come up and be a bit more compact, which maybe would have been risky to a point with the back 3 that you've got, but you have got a great back 3, and Jan Sommer could have come out. Or I think they all needed to kind of go back so that Mkhitaryan could shift over, because there was just this space. You talk about Dembele. Dembele was always drifting over to that space. João Neves was able to go over there. And also there was that, you could make those underlapping runs from Hakimi where he could just go and play up front as well. So there was so much space on that right-hand side. And it was so easy that the change had to be either, one, be a bit more aggressive altogether for me, or you had to go to like a 5-4-1 or something, which is just something that Inzaghi doesn't really do that, does he? He always wants to have that too.
I think a big thing was, and maybe no matter what Inter does, that maybe they couldn't have done anything, was when Mkhitaryan or Çalhanoğlu dropped into the centre-back positions so that like Pavard and Bastoni had the opportunity to go in front and make those runs.
Yeah.
they were doing it so slowly, and they were almost waiting for the ball to reach the player. So, like, it would get to a point where Dimarco would receive the ball, and then Barcelona would start to make the run. Like Doué, there was a few times when Doué, and this is one of the sides of his game that I was so impressed with. Bastoni's a big, strong player, and Doué was just doing enough to sort of hold on to him, so his runs forward were not that fast.
Right.
So then Dimarco would get the ball, and he would probably have a pattern all season of where he would pass that ball, because Bastoni's supposed to make this run forward, but because he wasn't making it as quick as he usually does, I was really disappointed by Dimarco's ability to sort of think on his feet and do something else. And so he would muscle memory do the pass anyway. So he'd either do a pass that was basically towards the area where Thuram was, or he would do a pass to where Bastoni was supposed to make the run, even if they weren't there. And so that they would lose the ball so many times because of that. And I think that sums up what Dimarco was all about in the game. There was an element of him being so out of his depth, off the ball. Like, you compare Hakimi, who was focused and concentrated and aggressive. He knew exactly where he wanted to be, and he would run and he would do it and be confident. Whereas Dimarco would be the entire defensive line are like here in one place, and then he's behind them, keeping players on side. I mean, the first goal, what is he doing? And
I thought he was a little bit hard done by with the first goal, just because he had it. And it's, two things could be true, and it's one where like there were so many problems. They were like caught in the headlights massively, but they definitely targeted him. So I guess three things can be true. They definitely targeted him, but when you had all these players over on the left-hand side, Dimarco had two players. He had Dembele and Hakimi at the same time. So it got to a point where he kind of half had to go with one of them. And actually Dembele, if you watch the goal, Dembele's actually comes out all the way, which just shows the fluency of which they're playing. But I think what's really glaring here, which kind of links to your point on Bastoni, is and how I think football might move forward a little bit, is the way that everyone stays in their places. And if a centre-back gives it and goes, that's seen as like, oh my God, what's going on? This is outrageously good. It was outrageously good, but I think PSG have shown that sort of two patterns of play is not enough anymore. Because Bastoni, in terms of like, he's done it all season long, like brilliantly, but like he would play it and give it, he would play it and then go, which is something you don't really see centre-backs do. But PSG knew that was coming. And I think in this age where like every game's watched, every game's analysed so much, you have to have like 4 or 5 different answers with the ball to get yourself out of nooks and crannies.
Yeah.
And that's why Dimarco, again, back to your point, he knows his 2-3 things. I think at the very, very top, and I'm so excited about this, like that's not enough anymore.
Yeah.
Whereas like the opposite is Vitinha. So Vitinha for the third goal, he's with what we know about DMs and sixes, which are like, someone's in the comments was saying he's not a 6. Like, no, he's not a 6, but he starts there often as a 6, right? He's like getting it and giving it and going, and then getting it and giving it and going. Whereas over the last 4 or 5 years, that DM that we think of, or even the first goal, that Dimarco goal, he's right up there on the edge of the box, ready to make a key pass to Doué, who then passes the ball to Hakimi. Whereas again, the 6s that we know are sort of sat in front of the two centre-backs, kind of protecting, being careful. Like that carefree nature of just like interpreting the game and then going with it and combining with different players. Like, I think that's the thing where, like, to answer this question, I don't think there was much that could be done, because I think PSG were playing the way football is going to be played, where it's this hybrid of like positional sense, but also just like loads of freedom, so that so it doesn't matter if you've watched game after game. It doesn't matter, because there'll be something else, because they're interpreting what's going on in front of them, a bit like you would in a 5-a-side game, as much as like those sort of deep tactical systems that we've seen that have worked, like have totally worked. But I think here it was broken, and like the energy and pace of this
Oh my
PSG
days.
team, and their ability to dribble too.
Well,
Like,
I think that was there was a huge difference in the two teams there, in that when an Inter player got the ball, it was looking to make a pass, and there were so many times they passed it back, they passed backwards, in a situation where if that was one of the PSG players, they actually might have just tried to beat a man, and then so they had a bit of space to pass forward.
Yeah.
And that was a huge difference. There's a huge gulf in sort of the technical quality of them. And I think that was maybe where Inzaghi probably had a bit of a dilemma, because he had his best technical quality players. But so what does he do? Does he bring someone like a Fratesi on? Does he try and bring does he bring Bissek on, obviously, who he did bring on?
Yeah,
Does he
then
bring a
got
bit of
injured.
engine on there, a bit of speed, so at least they can sort of counterbalance in that regard? But he will lose technical aspect. But the problem is, like, the technical players that are on the pitch, they're not thinking quick enough on their feet. They're not alert enough.
Calhanoglu really struggled.
Calhanoglu struggled. To be honest, I think Barella struggled. And there was a few moments where he did things, like he had a shot. I don't know if it was on the volley or it was like a shot. And I remember just thinking, like, why have you done that? And then there was an opportunity where he could have probably had a shot outside the box and he didn't. So I feel like he was just not really doing any of the right things. And he's probably Inter's player that they would look to be that version, almost like the PSG player on the Inter team kind of thing, where it's the person who can be a bit braver with the pass or beat a man. And he wasn't really doing any of that. And the other players around, who are more maybe the sort of system players who are doing the things that Inzaghi's coached them all year, they were just sort of resorting to that. And like what you mentioned, I wondered with the PSG players, because what I was so impressed with them is they were so good at reading what Inter were going to do. And I couldn't work out if we just happened to have a team here with PSG that, like, all the players have got a natural knack for knowing, like, what your next move will be, or if it's down to Luis Enrique's coaching, where he has figured out all the patterns that Inter will do, and he's just been able to convey that to the PSG players pre-match. So they just did it effortlessly. Like, they just knew, you could see, they knew just before Inter were going to do the pass, when they were starting to open up to do the pass, PSG would run to where that was going to be, and they just knew where it was going to be.
I thought the press was really impressive by them. Dembele worked so hard. Like, again, to that point, Bastoni would play it and go. And I think there's one moment where, like, Doué comes back and wins it back. But I think João Neves is there as well, like, ready to win it. So it is a mix, because, like, that's symptomatic of this PSG team, which is, like, we were talking about how I think Rio Ferdinand got a bit of heat for saying this was good for football. I think the point that it in the sort of within the sort of the house of PSG, there's a lot of things that, you know, people aren't thrilled about when it comes to, you know, the money of football and all that stuff. But in terms of football itself and how they've gone from one mode of Galacticos to this group, I think it highlights, and you see it in most levels of football, and you definitely, like, I always feel like I see it in the Championship as well. Some of those players, maybe less so in the last few years, you've got to have players with that hunger, and it is a thing. Like, and that's what's so impressive about this team as well, in terms of, like, their ability to win the ball back, and then their ability to kind of make those runs, but also, like, the intelligence feels like it's on this, like, new level. And I guess because the intelligence is so high, that allows for a kind of a new freedom within that group as well. That is, I just think, really exciting. So when Rio Ferdinand's talking about it was a victory for football, I think it's a victory for the fact that, okay, there's money spent on, you know, a lot of those players, but it's not about 2 or 3 players. It was kind of, as free as it was about the collective.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many clips from that if you're a coach, you take it and you show it to your group of players. I mean, the amount of times that Kvaratskhelia was a moment where he lost the ball and won it back within like 4 seconds. He just he straight away lost it, then hunts him down, gets it back.
In terms of what went right for PSG, to the point we just said, squad building took a different route than in the past, having those big ego stars, Mbappe, Neymar, Messi. How was Mbappe feeling, do you think?
I know.
Someone clip that up for me.
Do you know? I wonder how.
I was like Corey.
A few. I wonder how a few players feel. You know, like someone. There is a few PSG players where it's similar sort of thing with Napoli, where Napoli had some real good teams over the last 10 years that couldn't win the league, and you almost think, oh, I kind of wish they'd been there to win the league.
Yeah,
and there's a few at PSG where, weirdly, I'm like, oh, I wish Neymar was still there.
Yeah, I wish
Verratti was still there.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. There are a few where I'm like, oh, I kind of wish they got to do it. Mbappe, I'm not so much, and it's not anything against him, but it's. I do like the idea of you leave somewhere to go and win something, and then they win something, and you don't win it. I do like that because it shows that the club.
Yeah,
I can't.
It's bigger than the players.
It.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's been a lot of talk about Bruno, and should he go or not. He's sort of said today that he's not going to go, which is great for Man United. But I think like you say, there are other players, and sometimes when you take out a big personality like that, other players can kind of go, okay, well maybe I could ask for the ball now. Like that, that it can be found if you can figure it out. And with Mbappe, that's obviously been something that is fascinating, isn't it? Because I think it's a bit like a magnet sometimes, where it takes away from we were talking about, having answers. I think that's such a big thing in football, is that because everything's coming at you so quickly and everyone knows so much. So everyone's pressing you really quickly and they know what you probably want to do anyway. So you need 5-6 answers to get yourself out of trouble. And that's why I think dribbling is so important now in football, to be able to get yourself out of trouble. But when you've got a guy who's clearly your superstar and all roads kind of lead to that player, it makes it easier to defend. Whereas that's the thing with this PSG team. Like, are you going to give it to Doué or Dembele or Kvaratskhelia or Hakimi as well? That's the other thing. Like, Mendes has scored goals this year. Throughout the game, Vitinha was like dropping over to that left-hand side, and Mendes is playing as like a 10. Or
Fabian Ruiz might pop up with an outside the box.
Yeah,
shot.
He's so clever with his move as well. João Neves being kind of box to box at times. Sorry, my voice is going. So yeah, I think that doesn't happen if you've got Mbappe there, who you've got to get the ball to all the time. And so I think it obviously was good for PSG. Who's your man of the match?
Either it was originally going to be Dembele.
What kind of players do you like? What's your like?
But in my head I changed it to Kvaratskhelia. And I was so happy for him when he got the goal, because you could see like he was so desperate for it. There were a few times where he made incredible runs. There was a few shots he had that didn't quite hit.
Yeah, he maybe should have scored, right?
Yeah, but then the one that he scored was just unbelievable. And I just thought like his relentlessness the entire game. I think it was like in the 84th minute that he came off, so it was pretty much a full game. He was just, oh my days. If you were up against him, you'd just be like, just stop. Stop running. Honestly, like he did the job of that entire side. Like, it was just incredible. I actually think that I don't think people realised how good he was.
Well, do you know, you say it, I'm surprised you said it, because I sort of, maybe I'm just watching those few moments. I'm not seeing the off the ball movement that you're seeing in the stadium, because I thought he was okay, but yeah, he'd created a couple of chances for himself and missed them.
Yeah. But when he got the ball, weirdly, I think there was Doué probably showed the most quality. And Dembele probably in the first half, especially, maybe did the most pressing in terms of like defense from the front kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when he got the ball, it was when he got it that you thought they were going to go forward at their fastest. Like, I felt like his ability to get the ball and go was the best. Weirdly,
in the stadium, did you? Because I think the thing for me with Desiree Doué is he's so exciting and he's so clippable. I think there's definitely a Neymar vibe, of course, but a bit of a Ronaldinho vibe as well, in terms of Ronaldinho was the first player I remember realising, oh, he's got a bubble. Like, there's the fear that players have with him, that they don't really want to get into his sphere, because he's really gonna hurt you, because he's got like that aura about him. Like, did you feel that in the stadium?
Oh, 100%, yeah, 100%.
Because it's early days for him, obviously.
Because he is that sort of player, like you said, he could do a pirouette around you, which he did. He did a pirouette around Bastoni at one point. And yeah, that it's so like Lamine Yamal is incredible, right? I think Bastoni struggled more against Doué than Lamine Yamal. I think Bastoni, I don't actually know if it's down to the two players or if it's just down to you have a good game, you have a bad game kind of thing with Bastoni. But I felt Bastoni was able to use his strength in between Yamal and the ball to almost get in the way and sort of not keep him quiet, because he didn't keep him quiet, but there were lots of moments that don't make the highlights in that game, because I was at that game as well, the Inter-Barca game. And there were so many moments where he used his strength really well against Yamal. And
do you think any of that's the fact that Yamal kind of naturally wants to go inwards and therefore maybe away from Bastoni? Because I was just thinking there, in terms of reps at Bastoni, this is the horrible thing for Bastoni, is that he's got, with PSG, you've got Dembele was out there sometimes, Hakimi's out there sometimes, Doué's out there sometimes. So he's got like 3 different players to mark at different times all the time.
Yeah, I can't. It's strange. I think, because you had Koundé and you had Dani Olmo in the Barca game, so I don't know. I can't.
And it had Eric Garcia in the. Were you at that one? Like the mad one?
I was at the one.
4-3. Was it 4-3? Whoever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And so. Yeah, Eric Garcia, sorry.
Because that's what I was going to say. Garcia as well. I remember watching that game. Garcia would go, and the whole Inter team was like, he's not getting the ball because Yamal's Yamal's the guy. Back to that point of like the Mbappe thing, where like concern's a big thing, right? And so if there's just one player, Eric Garcia, who they're never going to pass to him because it's Yamal. Let Yamal do Yamal things. It does just allow you to focus on that one person. Then you can get Mkhitaryan and Dimarco and all of you on him.
But I think a big difference, actually, the more I think about it, between the games, and this is where I was really shocked that Dimarco started, if I'm honest, based on his performance against Barcelona. Because I'm a big fan of Dimarco, but I thought he had a torrid time against Barcelona. And I think when you've got a player like Carlos Augusto available, I don't really know why you wouldn't start with him. And then you've got Dimarco as a wildcard option. I
do it the other way around.
Yeah, right. I personally don't really understand. I also don't understand why Dimarco lasted 8 minutes in the second half. Like, I thought half time should have taken him off. Like, he was so out of his depth. Like, he wasn't concentrating in the game. Like, he honestly felt like sometimes he was out of it. Like, there were moments where I didn't know if he was defending space. Was he defending a man? He didn't ever really get tight to anyone, but then he was he had his back towards the ball at moments. Like, he did not seem focused in the game. And I don't necessarily think it's an ability thing, but more of a...
I think it's
the
overwhelmed.
big moment. Yeah. He's just not stepped up.
Also, there's like, in those big games, when you're desperate for it to go well, but quite quickly you realise it's not going well, there can be this feeling of quicksand. And if you think about his first half, he's gone, I look like a mug here. And I think he wasn't keeping the ball very well. The second goal comes off his foot. So I think by that point, his head's just like fried, which obviously not an overall excuse. But like, and I think they were absolutely targeting him as well.
There was a moment in the game, sort of around 25th minute, where Pavard makes a really good sliding tackle, and then you see him straight away, he's like celebrating it and trying to get the team lifted.
Right, yeah.
The fans didn't react to it at all.
Really?
And it, like, you compare it to like in English football, like when Newcastle actually played PSG. I remember that game at St James Park, and it was like they celebrated every tackle, and that was how they were able to do well in the game. They really they created an atmosphere kind of thing. Whereas I feel like at no point were the players able to connect with the fans together, or you could hear, and we were near the Inter fans who were incredible pre-match, but during the match, those PSG fans just took over. And again, like, Pavard makes this tackle, and you expect that for that moment there to be a bit of a sort of galvanisation, but all I could still hear was PSG fans. So the tackle didn't hit the way it could have hit, kind of thing. And it was those moments, it was that mixed in with then Inzaghi takes his blazer off, fuming, and he's prancing around, he's like shouting and screaming. And I almost got the impression when he was doing that, Inzaghi, similar to the Barcelona game, he's almost trying to get into the Inter's the players are so dejected. And I think he's doing it because he's almost saying, if you do this, this is how we get back into this game. Almost to try and convince them that he's of the full belief that as long as we do this, we'll get back into this game.
Yeah.
And it felt in the second half, there was a moment where he just wasn't as angry. And it was actually at that moment you're like, oh, I think you've realised there's nothing more you can say to convince these Inter players that they could do anything to get into this game.
That's an interesting thing in terms of management of where do you... So back to the thing about Russell Martin, he was saying that he said, I was so, well, so why don't you go up there? And he was talking about, standing in the technical area and how he hates it. But you've got your analysts watching the game and they're speaking to you. And he said, you've got to trust them. And he said, but on the pitch, they need you in a different level, almost not on a tactical level, really, on a sort of just to keep them honest almost. It's like having the teacher in the classroom, just so they're kind of switched onto it. But when it's going wrong, you can change the temperature or the focus, or you can shock someone. And how do you do that? And when do you do that? Do you do that? If you do that too early, you've sort of done it now, and you can't really do it again. Whereas if you can't, to that point, but at the same time, if they're drowning, you kind of want to offer something.
Yeah.
So it's tough.
But I don't know, as a player, I don't know what you'd be like. The way Inzaghi was on the side, that would not have helped me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. There'll be players on that team as well that were probably doing their best to ignore him.
Yeah. I think that it's interesting. I remember I used to play for a team called Cobham, and our right back, I used to have to talk to him before every game because he knew, and I knew, especially we were on a certain side, that the manager would just be like going at him if he was on the manager's side. But it was because it's all he could see. And I was like, get through the first half. You're going to be over there in a minute, and you can do what you want. But yeah, he hated it. And I heard this thing the other day, actually. I was talking about how that's all for show, that sort of losing it kind of. So it's more an emotive thing that maybe he was just trying to chuck that out there. But it's amazing, isn't it? That someone as lauded as he's been over the last 6 months, well, few years, I think he's generally considered to be one of the great managers at the moment. Was just kind of lost in that moment because he didn't have enough.
What happens to his stocks, to his value as a manager after this? Because it's not just the Champions League; it's the league, it's the cup.
Yeah.
You're in a situation in April where you could win a treble and you've won nothing. What happens? If you're a club watching this now across Europe, a manager that 2 months ago, most clubs in Europe you would expect would take him, would all those clubs still take him?
I think it's difficult because Romano stated that Al Hilal are waiting and are confident that Inzaghi will become their next head coach. So that's there on the table, it sounds like. The problem is, and Nima from the Italian Football Podcast was saying this, I thought it was interesting, is he's not got that many options because, well, maybe you can enlighten me on this, but he wouldn't go to Milan, right? He doesn't speak English, so he might not want to come to the Premier League, or it might put people off him coming to the Premier League, or something he'd have to sort of resolve somehow. Barcelona, it's not going to happen there. Real Madrid have got a new manager. So are there any other teams in Serie A that he could go to? Conte's obviously just won Serie A, so he's not going to go there. Juventus, he couldn't do that, could he? And would he want to?
Do you know what the problem is with him? Is that the club's got to want to play the way he plays as well.
Yeah.
And I feel like he suits getting the most out of players and creating a system that does that. But
do you feel like this? Yeah,
has he really proven that once you get to a certain level that he can take you over the line? Because when you actually look at it, he came into Inter in 2021, got to 2 finals at the Champions League, which is a fantastic achievement.
Right? Yeah.
But still didn't win any of them.
Yeah.
And then the domestic success, has he won more than 2 league titles? I don't think so. Because Napoli have won, Milan won, Juve.
Who won it last year? They won it last year, didn't they?
They won it last year. But then Pioli won it with Milan. Obviously, Conte's won it with Napoli.
Yeah.
His success in weirdly is probably not won as many trophies as you'd think.
Yeah, and it's kind of a victim of your own success to a point, because if you don't get to those finals, you can't lose them.
Yeah, true.
And you played Man City, who've
and
finished
their
off a treble.
performance in that final was actually really good.
Really good. Which I think is why everyone thought you could break PSG maybe, But I think obviously PSG were too much. Do you think it's the end of a cycle there? Then do you think because that is incredible. That's an incredible thing to go from like being so close to winning the league and now like, okay, well, let's rip it up and throw it in the bin. That seems mad.
I think the only thing I'd say is because Inter now will be in the process of rebuilding because of the age of some of their players.
Yeah.
It's not like, let's say they had a team that could go again. Because like this team, I think it was just Brozovic and Dzeko that weren't there. That the two different teams. Yeah, very similar team to the team that last made it to a final. So you could like you stick with them. It's the same group of players. Whereas there's question marks over like Çalhanoğlu's had quite a poor season by his regard. So there's maybe talk Acerbi could maybe get someone a bit younger in that position. Again, Dimarco, I think, who's a great talent, but is it going to work him playing that left wing back role? Is he defensively good enough to do it?
Yeah. I think people have given up on him a bit.
Does Bastoni want to stay as well? There's talk that maybe he might think that he should go elsewhere if he wants to do well. Like he's 26, so he's been there for a while now. I think he's signed like 2017, so it's like is something new for him on the cards. So they could think, well, if we're going to have a rebuild anyway, we could have a new manager for it.
It's now the end of a cycle. Yeah, it's the right time. Maybe. Final question. James, do you think Enrique's... This is a comment from the video as well. Slot Machine says, do you think Enrique's football will influence tactics moving forward? We've all seen the influence of Guardiola. Time for something different? ? Thoughts? Do you think it's as big as that, or do you think people are getting carried away?
It depends on what players you've got, doesn't it? I don't know. I feel like you see influences funnel down in like a country, like a manager will come over to a country and have a style that does well week in, week out, and you see like in the divisions below they start to do it, but not everyone's got the amount of ability / work rate that PSG have got, so it's not as simple.
That is the question mark that a lot of people talk about. I've got two feelings on it. I think there's two things that when we're looking at how these, because it feels like Arne Slot's going to play different. I think Arsenal are making tweaks and changes as well. And obviously what's worked for PSG, what's worked for Argentina as well. Shout out to the Purist Football. Amazing video. Exactly what's kind of been in my mind over the last 6 months as well. He kind of talks about where football's going. The two things that I think we will see that will be different is one, because this sort of 4-4-2 mid-block has worked so well for Arsenal and a lot of different teams. I think now people are thinking, how do I break that? And I think that will play into the hands of, I think, players maybe dropping into the back line a little bit more, sort of Vitinha. I feel like we're going to see it with Liverpool, because you've got to find a way to get around that 2 of the 4-4-2 in a mid block if you're trying to kind of break them a little bit. The other thing I think people will see more and more is like that third goal, that pass and move, and not just staying where you are, but also I think there's been this idea of like you stay in your positions. I think now you're going to see this more and more and more, that people come towards the ball to resolve an issue as opposed to staying away. Like long time ago when I used to coach football to kids, to try and get them to spread out, I'd make this rule that if you imagine a football pitch, imagine the halfway line, I'd put some cones there and I'd go, you can't score through the middle. You have to go kind of round. And so if they could understand it, it would make them, they wouldn't mess about there and just follow the ball. They would all spread out. And I think that's what we've been seeing and what people have been doing. Understandably, it's about the space. That's what Pep's brought in. I think the future is because everyone knows that, and everyone is, it does feel like these teams are sort of an extension of the mind of the manager, like Ralph Rangnick would say. Defensively, they are this like block, this block. To break that, it's not about staying away from each other. It's actually about coming towards each other and combining. Like there's a moment in this game I thought where naturally João Neves would stay out of it because Ruiz was there and Vitinha was there in the central areas. But actually what he ended up doing was he actually came towards it, so that I think it was Thuram, instead of sort of staying out the way, which would allow Thuram to sort of block that passing to João Neves and maybe make life difficult, he actually came closer And then you had this nice little triangle that you can just go boom, boom, pop round these players. So that relationism, which I know I've been talking about a lot, I think you're going to see more and more and more of that. And I think in a game like this, as dominant as this, and in the style that they played, that hybrid between positional play and letting Hakimi go, or Doué play as a centre forward, or Dembele come and play as a centre midfielder, like that interchange, I think we're going to see that more and more and more.
That's where I think Inzaghi could still have. There could still be clubs that will be like, "Oh, we'll go for him," because he's shown throughout his time at Inter that he's really good at experimenting with that, with players moving and feeling comfortable in areas that players don't usually feel comfortable. And he's made players feel comfortable who they're not superstar players, and he's made them do things that are out their comfort zone. And so I do think if you take this final out of the equation, I do think overall the football that Inter have played at times and some of the success he's had in matches, there's still very much there's still something there.
Every game's different.
Every game's different. The very beginnings of the games, both games versus Barcelona, when all of the Inter players they on purpose took the ball into their own corner, like Bastoni took it right into that left corner, and you could draw a circle between the halfway line and the goal, and they're like a rectangle of that area.
Yeah.
And every player, every Barcelona, every Inter player was in that area, apart from one player, and it was Dumfries, right on the other side at the halfway line, waiting for them to just come on, get a bit closer, Barca, get a bit closer, and then boom, it was out. And I think because they just didn't turn up in the way that they can turn up against PSG, you quickly forget all the games where they would do things like that.
Sure.
They would trap the opposition, really good teams, and then score very quick goals. So, he's proven that there's lots of elements of ideas that he's got that are really exciting. So I still have a lot of faith in Inzaghi as a manager, that he's still got more to do in the footballing world.
Yeah,